Human accidentally matched warmth with an alien girl. The meaning she shared later was gentle. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main character. Jason Matthews stood silently on the edge of the clearing, the cool wind cutting through his jacket as he scanned the alien landscape around him. He had always loved the quiet isolation of the forests, but this wasn't Earth. This was a planet on the edge of the galaxy, one that most humans had only heard about in stories. The air was thick with an almost electric energy, a mixture of the unfamiliar plants and the strange atmosphere of a world so unlike his own. He had been sent here on a mission, but things hadn't gone as planned. His ship had suffered damage, and now he was stuck in an alien environment with no way of contacting anyone. The planet had been uncharted, and Jason knew he had to survive, and fast. As he made his way through the dense underbrush, he suddenly stopped. Ahead of him, a figure emerged from behind a large, shimmering plant, a tall alien woman, her skin a radiant shade of blue, her long, silver hair floating gently in the breeze. Her eyes, glowing softly, locked onto his. She seemed as surprised to see him as he was to see her. Jason's breath caught in his chest as the woman took a hesitant step forward, her features a mixture of curiosity and wariness. Jason had seen many alien species during his time working in deep space, but none like this one. She wasn't just different in appearance. There was something about her presence that made the air itself feel charged. She wasn't like the aggressive, territorial beings he had encountered before. There was a vulnerability in her posture, a softness that he hadn't expected. The alien woman seemed to be waiting for him to make the first move, her gaze searching his face, perhaps trying to read him, trying to understand what he was. Jason swallowed, trying to control his nerves. He had never been good with first impressions, especially when it came to beings from other worlds. I didn't mean to intrude, Jason said, his voice steady but uncertain. The alien woman blinked, her expression unreadable for a moment before she responded, her voice melodic, though tinged with a trace of wariness. You are lost, she said simply, her words carrying a weight of understanding. Jason nodded, feeling the weight of his situation press down on him. Yeah, I guess you could say that. He took a cautious step forward, trying to gauge her reaction. I'm stranded here. My ship is down, and I don't know how to get back. The woman watched him for a long moment, her eyes never leaving his. Then, slowly, she extended her hand toward him, a gesture that seemed both an offer of peace and an invitation. Jason hesitated for a brief moment, before taking her hand. Her skin was warm, almost as if she were radiating heat, and he couldn't help but notice the way her touch seemed to send a ripple of energy through him. He wasn't sure what it was, but there was something about her, something that felt familiar, almost comforting in a way he couldn't explain. As she led him through the dense foliage, Jason couldn't help but steal glances at her, fascinated by the way she moved. There was a grace to her, a fluidity that seemed almost otherworldly. The way the light caught her skin, making it shimmer, was unlike anything he had ever seen. They didn't speak much as they walked. Jason tried to keep his mind focused on finding a way out of this situation, but every step he took seemed to draw him closer to her. It was as though the universe had placed them together for a reason, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for more than just a random encounter. The alien woman led him to a small clearing, where the temperature was noticeably warmer. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with an expression he couldn't quite read. You will be safe here, she said, her tone calm, almost soothing. Jason exhaled slowly, relieved to be out of the harsh winds. As he glanced around, he noticed that the clearing was unlike anything he had seen before, soft. Glowing plants dotted the landscape, casting an ethereal light across the ground. He felt his muscles relax for the first time since crashing on this planet. Thank you, Jason said, his voice quieter now. I didn't expect to find someone out here. I thought I'd be stuck alone. The alien woman gave him a small, knowing smile, her gaze softening. You are not alone. She looked up at the glowing plants, her eyes reflecting their light. Sometimes, Warmth comes from unexpected places. Jason felt a strange warmth stir inside him at her words. He didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, surrounded by an alien world and a woman he couldn't quite understand, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known he needed. Whatever the meaning behind her words, Jason knew one thing for certain. He had found something worth holding on to. Something, or someone, that could change everything. And as he looked into her eyes, he couldn't help but wonder if this was just the beginning of something far greater than he could have imagined. Jason sat on a flat rock near the edge of the clearing, his gaze drifting over the alien landscape. The trees here were unlike anything he had seen on Earth, their trunks wide and gnarled, their branches stretching upward like long, twisted fingers reaching for the sky. The air felt different too, thicker somehow, as if it carried an energy that made everything feel alive in a way he couldn't fully understand. He glanced to his side, where Illyra had seated herself on another rock. She wasn't speaking, but he could tell she was lost in thought, her glowing eyes focused on the distant horizon. Her presence felt both distant and strangely familiar, like something he couldn't quite place, but knew he needed. After a few moments of silence, Jason finally spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said, his voice low. Illyra turned her head slightly toward him, but didn't speak right away. She seemed to be waiting for him to continue. "About warmth," he added. "I didn't quite understand it at first, but now, I think I get it." Illyra didn't respond at once, but she shifted slightly, as if considering his words. The air between them felt heavier now, filled with the weight of unspoken things. "You are different from what I expected," Illyra said, quietly after a long pause. "When I first saw you, I thought you would be like the others. Cold, unfeeling, but you are not." Jason tilted his head, surprised by her words. He had never seen himself as anything special, just another human trying to make his way through life. But here, on this alien world, surrounded by someone so different, he felt something inside him stir, something he had long buried. "I don't know what to say," Jason admitted. "I'm not sure what I'm doing here, to be honest. I never expected to end up in a place like this, or to meet someone like you." Illyra's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, though it was tinged with sadness. "You don't have to say anything. Sometimes, it's enough just to be present, to share a moment, even when that moment is strange or unfamiliar." Jason considered her words carefully. There was a depth to her that he hadn't fully appreciated until now. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone with her own pain, her own history. He had only begun to understand that. And in some strange way, it was as if their fates had aligned in this moment, this place, for a reason. "I don't know if I can fix everything for you," Jason said after a long pause. "But I can listen, and I can try." Illyra's gaze softened, the glow in her eyes flickering ever so slightly. "You don't need to fix anything, Jason. That's not what I'm asking for. I just needed someone who saw me, not as a weapon, not as an object, but as a person." Jason's chest tightened at her words. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear that, to know that she saw him as more than just another stranger in her world. "I'm not sure I'm much of a person to be seen," Jason said quietly, the weight of his past pressing down on him. "I've made mistakes, and I've been running from them for a long time." Illyra didn't respond immediately, but her eyes remained on him, steady and unwavering. She reached out, her hand brushing lightly against his arm, a gesture of comfort. The warmth from her touch sent a ripple through him, a reminder of how much he had been craving connection, even if he hadn't known it. "We all have our scars," Illyra said softly. "Some are visible, some are hidden, but they don't define us." Not completely. Jason's heart beat a little faster at her words. There was something about her that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't beyond redemption. That perhaps there was still a chance for him to make things right, to find something worth fighting for. "I'm glad you found me," he said quietly, meeting her gaze. Illyra's smile grew a little wider. "I think, perhaps, I was meant to find you too." The silence between them stretched for a few moments, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that filled the space with understanding, with the possibility of something new. As the last of the daylight began to fade, Jason and Illyra sat together, the gentle hum of the planet's wildlife filling the air. There was no immediate urgency, no need to rush. For the first time since his crash, Jason felt at peace. In a world full of unknowns, surrounded by someone so different. He had found a connection that was simple, yet profound. And for that moment, it was enough. The next morning, Jason woke to the soft rustling of leaves outside the clearing. He stretched, the warmth of the previous evening lingering in his mind as he glanced over at Alara, who was already awake, sitting on a large stone near the edge of the clearing. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment, Jason just watched her, mesmerized by the calmness in her posture. It was strange how quickly the time had passed since they first met. Despite the unfamiliar world around him, he felt more at ease than he had in months. The air was cooler now, a light mist hanging in the early morning light, and the distant sound of alien wildlife added a tranquil backdrop to the silence. "Good morning," Jason said as he stood, brushing the dust from his pants. Alara opened her eyes slowly, her gaze meeting his with an almost serene expression. "Good morning, Jason," she replied softly, her voice still holding that melodic quality that seemed to soothe him. She stood gracefully, moving with a fluidity that reminded him of the strange energy that seemed to surround her. "What's the plan for today?" Jason asked, adjusting his gear. He had no idea where they were headed, but he trusted Alara more than he cared to admit. "We should move further west," Alara replied, her tone thoughtful. "There is a village near the coast. We can find supplies and maybe some answers about your ship." Jason nodded, his curiosity piqued. The idea of finding help, or at least some way to communicate with others, was a small but welcome hope. He had been stranded on this alien world for too long, and the thought of getting back to Earth, or at least getting out of the wilderness, was a beacon in the distance. "Lead the way," Jason said, falling in step beside her. As they walked, the atmosphere between them was different today. There was no tension, no awkwardness. Just two people, moving through a world neither fully understood but both learning from. The landscape around them was both beautiful and alien. The sky above them was a mix of purple and orange hues, the sun casting strange shadows over the strange plants and trees. The ground beneath their feet was soft and uneven, but they moved together with ease, navigating the terrain with a quiet understanding. "What's it like where you're from?" Jason asked after a while, breaking the silence. Alara glanced at him, her eyes briefly flickering with something unreadable. "My people are nomads," she said softly. "We wander from place to place, never staying in one spot for too long. We are connected to the land, to the energy that flows through it. Our world is nothing like this. It's harsh, barren, but we make do." Jason could hear the pain in her voice, the weight of her past. It reminded him of his own struggles, of how he had been running from his own failures for so long. He felt a sudden impulse to reach out, to offer something, anything to ease her burden. "I get that," Jason said quietly. "I've been running too. Away from my past, from mistakes I made." Alara didn't respond immediately, but she glanced at him again, her expression softening. "We all have our burdens," she said, her voice gentle. "But it is what we do with them that matters." Jason looked at her, her words resonating with him more than he cared to admit. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't alone in his struggles. "What about you?" Jason asked, his voice quiet. "What do you want from all this?" Alara paused, her gaze shifting to the horizon. "I want to find peace," she said simply. "For myself, for my people, and maybe, just maybe, to find a way to heal the wounds that have been left behind." Jason nodded slowly, his heart heavy with understanding. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about finding something real, something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, that something was here, in this alien world, with this woman who had shown him more than he ever expected. As they continued their journey, Jason felt a shift in the air around them. There was no longer any fear, no longer any uncertainty. Just the steady march forward, side by side, towards whatever awaited them on the other side of this strange, beautiful world. The walk to the village took longer than Jason had expected. The sun had started to dip lower in the sky, casting an orange hue over the landscape, and yet they still hadn't reached their destination. As they walked, Jason found himself increasingly drawn to Alara. There was something about her calm, almost ethereal presence that made everything else seem less important. They spoke little, but the silence between them was never uncomfortable. It felt like an unspoken understanding, a mutual respect that was slowly growing between them. Ilara's movements were fluid, graceful, her glowing skin catching the last rays of the sun. Jason couldn't help but admire the way she seemed to blend so naturally with the alien world around them. Despite her beauty, there was an aura of strength to her, something that told him she had been through much in her life. He had seen it in the way she carried herself, the weight of past battles, past losses. Jason had his own burdens, but somehow, with Ilara, he felt lighter. His mind wandered to the stories she had told him, of her nomadic people, of the struggles they had faced. She had been through so much, yet she still held a certain grace about her. It made him wonder what her life had been like before they met, before they were both thrown together in this strange world. As they neared the village, the sounds of life became more apparent. The distant chatter of voices, the hum of machines, the rustling of leaves as animals moved through the underbrush. It was a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of the wilderness they had just left behind. Jason's stomach growled softly, reminding him of the hunger he had been ignoring. He hadn't realized how long it had been since he had eaten properly. Ilara glanced over at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "You're hungry," she said softly. Jason chuckled, feeling a little embarrassed. "Yeah, I guess I am. Haven't had much since I got here." She nodded, her smile widening just a fraction. "I'll make sure we get something to eat when we get to the village." Jason didn't respond, but he felt a surge of gratitude towards her. He had no idea how much longer he would have lasted without her guidance. The village came into view, a small settlement nestled against the edge of a vast, shimmering body of water. The buildings were made of a strange, crystalline material that seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. There were no windows, only openings in the walls, and the roofs were shaped like sweeping curves, almost like sails. It was beautiful, in its own alien way, and Jason found himself staring at it for a moment, taking in the unfamiliar yet somehow comforting sight. "Welcome," Ilara said, her voice soft, almost reverent as they entered the village. The people there were different from Ilara in subtle ways, still alien, but not as striking. They moved with purpose, exchanging nods and brief words with Ilara as they passed by. Jason couldn't help but feel like an outsider in this world, but at the same time, he felt strangely at home. It was hard to explain, but there was something about the way the people here carried themselves that made him feel like he belonged. As they walked deeper into the village, Ilara led him to a small, open area where a fire crackled in the center, surrounded by large stones. There were several other figures seated around the fire, all of them watching Ilara with curiosity. When she approached, the others stood, giving her a respectful bow. Ilara returned the gesture with a nod, and then turned to Jason. "This is where we can rest," she said. "We will speak to the village leaders tomorrow, but for now, let's eat and rest." Jason nodded, his exhaustion catching up with him. He had been on his feet for hours, and he was grateful for the opportunity to sit down and relax. Ilara handed him a small bowl of what looked like a stew, the steam rising from it in delicate swirls. The smell was unfamiliar but inviting, and he took a tentative sip. To his surprise, it tasted better than he had imagined, rich and hearty, with flavors he couldn't quite place but found comforting. As he ate, he felt a warmth spread through him, not just from the food but from the quiet companionship of Ilara and the people around him. For the first time since arriving on this planet, Jason felt a sense of peace, a feeling that perhaps things were finally beginning to fall into place. He glanced over at Ilara, who was watching him quietly, her eyes soft. In that moment, he realized just how much he had come to rely on her. She had become something more than just a guide or a stranger in a strange world. She was someone he could trust, someone who had shown him kindness in the most unexpected of places. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to make this strange world feel a little less foreign. The night passed quietly, and by the time the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, Jason was already awake. He sat on the edge of his makeshift bed, his back against one of the smooth stones near the fire pit. The village had settled into a peaceful rhythm, with the soft sounds of alien life blending with the distant hum of the water. Ilara had risen earlier than him, as usual, moving with the grace of someone accustomed to the harsh realities of survival. Her figure, silhouetted against the soft light of the morning, was both serene and powerful. Jason watched her for a moment, taking in the quiet determination that radiated from her. He felt a sense of calm settle over him, despite the uncertainty of their situation. Ilera turned toward him, her eyes meeting his with that quiet intensity he had come to know so well. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady. Jason nodded, pushing himself to his feet. "Yeah, let's go. I want to find out more about this place. About how they can help me fix my ship." Ilera gave a small nod, and together they began walking toward the heart of the village. As they moved deeper into the settlement, Jason couldn't help but notice the subtle differences in the way the villagers went about their day. There was a sense of unity here, a quiet understanding between the people. They didn't speak much, but there was an unspoken connection, a shared purpose that was hard to ignore. It was a stark contrast to the chaos and fragmentation Jason had known back home. "This place, it feels different," Jason said, his voice thoughtful as they passed a small group of villagers tending to a crop of alien plants. Ilera glanced over at him, her eyes briefly flickering with something unreadable. "It is," she said softly. "My people have always valued balance. We live with the land, not against it. It's not perfect, but it works." Jason thought about her words for a moment. Balance. He had never thought much about it, not in the way she meant. Back home, life had always been about pushing forward, achieving more, fighting for survival. There was little room for balance, for harmony. "I think I get it," Jason said after a moment. "Back home, we're always chasing something. Progress, success, you name it. But maybe we've lost something along the way." Ilera didn't answer immediately, but there was a slight shift in her expression, as if she were seeing him in a new light. "Maybe you're not so different from us after all," she said quietly. The words hung between them for a moment, and Jason felt a flicker of something. Hope, maybe, stir inside him. He had been so focused on survival, on fixing what had gone wrong, that he hadn't taken the time to think about what it all meant, what he really wanted. As they walked further into the village, they reached a large building at the center, its walls made of smooth, translucent material that seemed to shimmer in the light. It was unlike anything Jason had ever seen, an alien design, but somehow familiar in its simplicity. "This is where the leaders of the village meet," Ilera explained. "They'll be able to help you with your ship." Jason nodded, his curiosity growing. As they entered the building, he was greeted by several figures, tall, dignified aliens with a calm presence. Ilera introduced him, and they exchanged a few words before one of the leaders, a tall female with silver skin, stepped forward. "You are the human who fell from the sky," she said, her voice deep and melodic. Jason felt a strange sense of connection with her, as if she understood more than she let on. "Yes," Jason replied. "My ship crashed. I'm hoping you can help me fix it." The alien leader nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering. "We've seen your kind before, though never in this way. You are far from home, but we are willing to help." Jason's heart lifted slightly. Maybe, just maybe, he was going to find a way out of this. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." The leader's expression softened, and for a moment, Jason could see a glimmer of something else in her eyes. Compassion, perhaps. "You are welcome here," she said simply. "We will help you. But first, you must understand what we value. We do not just repair ships. We repair bonds. If you seek help, you must also give something of yourself." Jason nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what she meant. But he could sense that there was more to this place, more to the people here, than just technology or survival. It was about connection. And maybe, for the first time, he was ready to embrace it. As the leader spoke to Ilera, outlining the terms of their agreement, Jason stood quietly, his thoughts drifting back to his own life. The past seemed far away now, a distant memory that no longer defined him. He wasn't just running anymore. Maybe it was time to stop and face what lay ahead, whatever that might be. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Jason worked alongside Ilera and the villagers, learning more about their ways and their world. The village, with its gentle pace and sense of unity, was a stark contrast to the life he had left behind on Earth. Here, there was no rush, no urgency. Time seemed to move differently. He found himself slowly shedding the layers of stress and anxiety that had defined him for so long. It was as if the alien world, with its unfamiliar beauty and quiet strength, was helping him find peace. He spent most of his time helping with small tasks around the village, fixing tools, assisting with the repair of some of the energy sources, and learning about the technology the villagers used. It was advanced. Yes, but in a way that felt natural, harmonious with the environment, not forced or industrialized. Ilera often led him to places he hadn't yet explored, showing him the landscape, explaining the way the people lived in balance with the world around them. She had an ease about her, a connection to this place that Jason envied. She was always calm, never rushing, always present in the moment. "Your people are different," Ilera said one evening, as they sat together under the stars, the village quiet around them. Jason glanced at her, confused. "How so?" he asked. "You're always rushing," she said softly, her eyes looking up at the sky. "Chasing something. You never stop to just be. I can see it in you." Jason's chest tightened slightly. She was right. He had always been running from his mistakes, from his past, from the things he couldn't face. And now, on this alien world, he was still chasing, still searching for something to fix, something to repair. But he hadn't stopped to think about what he really wanted, what he truly needed. "I guess I've always felt like there was something missing," Jason admitted, his voice quiet. "Like I was always just trying to fix things, to make up for what I couldn't do right." Ilera turned her gaze to him, her eyes thoughtful. "Maybe you don't need to fix everything," she said gently. "Maybe sometimes, just being is enough." Jason fell silent, her words settling in his mind. He had never thought about it that way. Back home, everything had been about fixing, about progress. But here, in this strange village, everything seemed to flow in its own time, its own rhythm. Maybe Ilera was right. Maybe he didn't have to keep running, keep trying to fix everything. Maybe it was time to stop and just be. As the days turned into weeks, Jason found himself more and more at peace. The village was quiet, yes, but there was a kind of strength in that silence. The people were kind, welcoming, and they treated him with a respect he hadn't expected. And Ilera, she had become something more to him than just a guide or a companion. She had become a friend, someone who understood him in a way that no one else ever had. There was still so much about her that Jason didn't understand. She was an alien, a being from another world, with experiences and a history that were entirely different from his own. And yet, when she looked at him, he didn't feel like an outsider. He didn't feel like a stranger. He felt understood. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. One evening, as they sat around the fire with the villagers, Jason found himself watching Ilera as she spoke with one of the elders. She was laughing, a soft, melodic sound that seemed to warm the air around them. Jason couldn't help but smile. He realized then just how much he had come to care for her, how much she had come to mean to him. She had opened something in him that he had long forgotten, something pure and simple. It was a feeling he couldn't quite put into words, but it was real. And as he sat there, watching her, he knew that whatever happened next, whatever challenges lay ahead, he wasn't alone. He had found something worth fighting for, something worth staying for. And for the first time, Jason felt like he was no longer just surviving. He was living, and it was enough. The days had become a comfortable rhythm for Jason. He woke with the sunrise, helped the villagers with their daily tasks, and spent the evenings by the fire, learning more about Ilera and her world. The once unfamiliar landscape now felt like home, the sounds of alien wildlife becoming background noise to his thoughts. But something had shifted within him, something deeper than just acclimating to his surroundings. The connection he felt with Ilera had grown. It wasn't just her kindness or her strength, though those were certainly qualities he admired. It was something unspoken, something that had slowly woven its way into the fabric of his life here. She had become someone he could count on, someone who understood the parts of him he had long kept hidden. And she trusted him in return, though he had never asked for that trust. The days of hard labor and long walks through the village had started to feel like a new beginning. The village's leaders had finally agreed to help Jason with his ship, but they had also asked something of him in return. The villagers didn't believe in simply fixing what was broken, they believed in understanding it, learning from it, and making sure it worked in harmony with the world around them. It wasn't about technology for the sake of progress. It was about integration. Jason hadn't fully understood that at first, but the more he learned about their way of life, the more he saw the wisdom in it. As he worked alongside the villagers, slowly repairing his ship with their help, Jason began to feel a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just here to fix a machine. He was here to learn, to grow, and to understand a different way of being. And in the process, he found that it wasn't just his ship that was being repaired. It was him. "You've come a long way," Ilara said one evening, as they sat together under the stars, the flickering fire casting a warm glow on her face. Jason looked over at her, surprised by the softness in her voice. He had grown used to her strength, her quiet leadership, but there were moments like this, small, tender moments, when her vulnerability shone through. "I've had good company," Jason replied, his voice low but sincere. Ilara's smile was small, but it reached her eyes. "You've had more than that. You've had patience. The patience to learn, to adapt. Not all humans are like that." Jason chuckled softly. "Maybe I'm not like most humans." The words were out before he could stop them, but he didn't regret saying them. There was truth in them. He had spent most of his life running, always pushing forward, never stopping to understand where he was or why. But here, in this village, with Ilara by his side, he had learned what it meant to slow down, to breathe, to be present. It wasn't easy, and there were times when he still felt the pull of his past, but he was starting to see that maybe it was okay not to have all the answers. Maybe it was okay to just exist for a while. Ilara shifted slightly, her eyes moving to the fire. "You've also shown us that we can trust in the unexpected," she said, her voice quiet. "Your people don't always fit the image we've been told about. I think we've learned something from you too." Jason wasn't sure what to say to that, but the warmth in his chest was enough to speak for him. He had never thought of himself as a teacher, but perhaps that was what he had become. A lesson in patience, in humility, and in the quiet strength of simply being. As the fire crackled between them, Jason realized that there was still so much to learn, so much more to discover about himself, about this world, and about the people he had come to care for. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace that wasn't fleeting, a sense of purpose that was not defined by what he could fix or achieve. It was defined by who he was becoming. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who had shown him a new way of life, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. As the days passed, the village began to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like home. Jason had made peace with his new life, finding solace in the rhythm of everyday tasks, the sound of the villagers' voices, and the quiet companionship of Ilara. It had been weeks since he first arrived, and while he still hadn't fixed his ship, he had started to see that there was more to life than simply escaping his past. Every day he spent here, he felt the weight of his old life lifting just a little bit more. The bond between him and Ilara had deepened in ways he hadn't expected. They spent hours talking, sharing stories of their lives, his from Earth, and hers from the nomadic life of her people. He learned of her struggles, the hardships her people had endured, and the way she had been shaped by her past. Ilara, in turn, learned about the pressures Jason had faced on Earth, the constant need to prove himself, and the burden of never feeling quite at home. There was a shared understanding between them, a quiet connection that went beyond words. They didn't need to explain everything to each other. They just understood. One evening, as the two of them walked through the village, Ilara stopped and turned to face him. Her expression was soft but serious. "Jason," she began, her voice steady, "you've changed since you arrived. I see it in the way you walk, the way you speak. You've become more at peace with yourself." Jason met her gaze, feeling a warmth spread through him at her words. It wasn't something he had consciously worked on. It had simply happened. But now that she mentioned it, he realized that she was right. The restlessness that had once defined him had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance of the present moment. "I think it's because of this place," Jason said slowly. "I never realized how much I needed a break from the constant noise, the pressure, the feeling of always needing to run. Here, everything just feels different, more peaceful." Ilara nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Sometimes, it takes stepping away from everything to see what truly matters. Your world was built on constant motion, on achieving and striving. Here, we value balance. And balance brings peace." Jason absorbed her words, realizing that she was speaking from experience. Balance had become an integral part of the way of life here. It wasn't just a philosophy, it was how the villagers lived. It was how Ilara lived. "I think I'm starting to understand that," Jason said quietly, his voice full of introspection. "I used to think peace was something you had to fight for, something you earned. But maybe peace is just letting go. Ilara smiled, her expression softening as she stepped closer to him. It's about finding harmony with what is, not what could be, she said. Once you let go of the need to control everything, you make space for something deeper, something real. Jason felt the truth of her words settle in his chest. He had spent so much of his life fighting, trying to force his way through the chaos. But now, with Ilara by his side and the village around him, he felt like he was finally starting to understand the power of letting go. As they continued walking through the village, Jason felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known in years. The tension that had always lived in his muscles, the constant urge to keep moving, had softened. He was here, in this moment, with these people. And that was enough. Ilara was right. Peace wasn't something he had to earn. It was something he had to embrace. They arrived at a small clearing at the edge of the village, where the light of the setting sun bathed everything in a golden glow. Jason stopped for a moment, taking in the view. The landscape stretched out before him, vast and beautiful, with the soft rustling of alien leaves in the breeze. It was a world unlike any he had ever known, and yet, in this moment, it felt like home. "It's beautiful," Jason said, his voice filled with quiet awe. Ilara stood beside him, her gaze also fixed on the horizon. "Yes," she agreed, her voice gentle. "It is. And so are you, Jason. You're finally seeing yourself for who you truly are." Jason looked at her, his heart full. For the first time, he truly understood what she meant. He wasn't defined by his past, by his mistakes, or by the things he couldn't change. He was defined by what he was becoming. And in this quiet village, with Ilara beside him, he was becoming something new, something whole. And for the first time in his life, he was okay with that. Weeks passed in what seemed like the blink of an eye. The village had become Jason's world, and with it, he had become a part of its quiet rhythm. The once distant thoughts of returning to Earth had slowly faded into the background as he settled into this new life. Each day brought new experiences, new moments to share with Ilara, and with the villagers who had come to accept him as one of their own. Jason worked alongside Ilara on the last stages of fixing his ship. It was clear that the repair process was not just about restoring the vessel. It was a lesson in patience, in the balance that the villagers had spoken of. Every detail had to be accounted for, not just in the mechanics, but in how it would function in harmony with the land. The ship was more than just a machine now. It was a symbol of what Jason had learned here, of how far he had come since arriving. One evening, as they worked under the dim light of the setting sun, Ilara handed him a tool, her fingers brushing against his. The simple touch sent a familiar warmth through him, and Jason looked up to meet her gaze. Her eyes were softer than usual, her expression quiet, thoughtful. "Jason," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you've done more than fix the ship. You've fixed something within yourself." Jason felt a lump form in his throat at her words. It wasn't just the repairs that mattered, it was the journey. The peace he had found here, the connection he had formed with Ilara, had changed him in ways he couldn't explain. He had come to this place broken, unsure, but now he felt whole. "I don't know if I'm ready to leave," Jason admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought coming here was just about survival, but it's become something more, something I didn't expect." Ilara smiled softly, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "You don't have to leave, Jason. But remember, home isn't just a place. It's the people, the connections, the moments that shape us." Jason nodded, understanding her words more than he ever had before. It wasn't about where he came from. It was about who he had become. The village, Ilara, this world, had shown him that. They had shown him what it meant to truly live, to stop chasing after the past, and embrace the present. As the last of the repairs were completed, Jason stood in front of his ship, looking at it as if seeing it for the first time. It wasn't just a machine anymore. It was a bridge to the future, to the life he had found here. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Ilara stood beside him, her presence steady and comforting. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice gentle. Jason glanced at her, his heart full of gratitude. "I'm ready," he replied. And for the first time in a long time, he truly meant it. The ship's engines roared to life, a sound that echoed through the quiet village. Jason looked out at the horizon one last time, knowing that while he might leave this world, the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever. As he turned the ship toward the sky, Ilara's figure grew smaller in the distance, but the bond between them remained. They had found something in each other, something real. And that, Jason knew, was just the beginning of the next chapter.